Hey everybody, Dan here with Pain Free You. Today I wanted to talk about dizziness. And I guess the topic here will be why dizziness is fascinating. And I'm sure some of you folks are going, fascinating? What are you, crazy? So, just going to kind of give you my take on it. So we're going to relax our body, breathe. Long coaching day today. 2 group coaching calls, 6 hours of coaching. Actually, each one of them went over a little bit, so almost 6.5 hours. So, relax, breathe. And I'm talking about dizziness because I've got a number of people in the group coaching where dizziness is one of their issues, or a new issue, or an old issue. And that would also include vertigo or PPPD. So, dizziness. The more I hear about it, the more fascinating I find it. Now, I did a video a while ago that said sensitivities are volume issues, meaning when the brain perceives something is dangerous, it turns up that sense of smell, hearing, light, whatever it may be, and it turns up the volume because the brain's job is safety and survival. And so if it perceives there's something that's dangerous, it turns it up. Case in point, mom is chemically sensitive. She can smell chemicals way before any of us in the family can. For example, in her home, she's in an apartment, and she can tell if they cleaned the bathroom down the hall. How? She can smell it. She can smell the bleach. I'll say, I don't smell it. She goes, yeah, they cleaned the bathroom. Sure enough, I go out of her apartment, down the hall, into the bathroom. Yep, I can smell the bleach. But she smelled it from her apartment, 50, 60 feet away. Is she crazy? Nope, it was actual. But because her brain has learned that chemicals are scary, dangerous, her brain literally turned up the volume on her sense of smell. That can happen with things like EMFs, mold, chemicals, food sensitivities, allergies. With fear, the brain can turn up the sensitivities in the sinuses to be more sensitive to allergens, pet allergies, whatever it may be. Outdoor pollens, grass, tree, pollens, all that stuff. So I think sensitivities in general are a volume issue. The more fear there is, the louder the sensitivities are turned up. So how does that apply to dizziness? Well, our sense of balance is a sense. Am I solid or am I a little wobbly? So if the brain perceives that we've got a balance issue, a dizziness issue, whether it be extreme like vertigo or a mild dizziness, the brain will turn up the volume on the vestibular balance system, and it will be that much more highly attuned to it. And if you view this entire dizziness experience through the lens of fear, terror, panic, it cranks up the vestibular system. Now, I find it fascinating because I had a story. A lady said to me, she says, I can't stand still, I can't walk, but I can ride a bike through the busy city streets of New York. I can rent a city bike, ride it around, navigate traffic and all that stuff. Well, how the heck is that possible if she can barely stand still or sit on a couch without feeling like she's going to fall over? How the heck do you ride a bike? And it dawned on me. It's because on a bicycle, she expects to be off balance because that's what riding a bike is. You're off balance 99% of the time because you're constantly making subtle adjustments with the handlebars to stay balanced. So because the brain expects to be out of balance, it doesn't perceive that out of balance from the lens of fear, and therefore it seems normal. Same thing, you're on a boat. you expect the waviness and all that stuff, not a big deal. But when you get off the boat and you stand, you're expecting to be stable. And if there's any sense of wobbly, your brain goes, holy crap, what's that? Right? So it's driven by fear. It's driven by the perception that I'm supposed to be stable. But even look at it this way. Even walking down the hallway or across the driveway, human beings are off balance a lot of the time. But we're very practiced at it. We've got feet and muscles and joints that adjust to keep us balanced. But we're off balance a lot of the time, but we've got all these micro adjustments in our feet and our legs and everything else that really keeps us upright. It's a miraculous system how learning to walk as a toddler, like a year old, they figure it out. Take a couple steps, drop down, land on their butt, take more, and they learn to balance. Sometimes it's with their arms and balancing. And then after a while, you can walk and just be normal and stay balanced. But there's all micro adjustments. The brain and the body is infinitely tuned to staying in balance. But if you've had an episode where you got dizzy for some reason, and the brain starts to fear this sensation called dizziness or vertigo. And don't get me wrong, I've met and seen people with severe vertigo. And it's rough. It's rough, for sure. But do your best to not fuel it with fear of the next episode or of the next this or the next that. Because if the fear drives the volume level of the vestibular system, panicking is not going to make the dizziness go away. More fear, more freak out, not going to make the dizziness go away. That's instructing the brain, keep the volume pegged on level 10 on the vestibular system and be hypersensitive to any sense of wavering and overreact to it with panic and more fear, and the dizziness can get even more extreme. The vertigo can get more extreme. So what's the answer? Understand you're not going to be perfectly in balance at all times. And if you have that sensation of, oh, that was a little weird, okay, whatever. Don't care, right? I had an experience at the lake house that I rent in June, and we've got a floating dock out there, which basically means it's on like these big plastic floats, and you walk out there and the dock is attached to the main dock by chains, and you step on it and it wobbles and it moves. And if you stand out there fishing from the dock or just hanging out on the dock, it's very wobbly for a long period of time. Combine that with being out on a kayak where you're on the water. There was plenty of times where I'd come back into the cottage and I'd be in the bathroom, and I'd feel whoa, because I was unstable for a long time on the floating dock or in the kayak, and I would laugh at it. I would laugh. I'm like, wow, that's kind of weird. They call that your sea legs. You get your sea legs when you're out on a boat a lot. You get more used to adjusting for the waves and the different things. But I didn't buy into it with fear, and it never became persistent. But the more fear you have of being dizzy, the more likely the brain will amplify or keep amplified the vestibular system and the sensitivity of that system. So the solution, as it is for most of the things I talk about, safety. Safety. Teach the brain that being a little bit off balance is not a horrible thing. Now, look, I get it. Some of you are going to be, but I'm really off balance. I almost fall over. I have to hold on to the walls. I get it. Fear is still not your friend in that case. Fear is not your friend in the case of extreme dizziness or vertigo. Calm, reassurance. This is going to pass. This is not a permanent thing. Right? Important stuff, folks. Safety is always way better than panic. Nobody got better by freaking out. Nobody. And so it's really important to convey safety as best as you can. And I know if you're in the middle of a dizzy spell and it's a tough one, it's hard to do. So get yourself safe. If you're at risk of falling over, sit down. Get off your feet. Be wise. Trust your intuition that says, I got to sit down. Right? And do what you can to make yourself comfortable and get safety. And then kind of smile and go, whew, that was a doozy. But it is fascinating how the brain works. And if the brain is worried about dizziness, it'll actually amplify the vestibular system so it can sense it more quickly. And that's why we get dizzy more often. And I have coaching clients who say, you know what? I was having a tough day, relaxed for a while, and all of a sudden I had to go do something. And I went and I did something for 6 hours, and I wasn't dizzy because I had to do it. And when we run into cases where we have to do something and we set aside our fears and say, all right, got to do it, we do better. And that happens with any number of symptoms. And so sometimes necessity and the need to go do something that you might typically say, I don't want to, gets the brain out of the fear mode and says, got no choice, I'm going to go do it. And you end up feeling better when you're doing things because you have to. So why not take that same attitude? Well, if I can feel better by doing things I have to, why can't I feel better by doing things I want to do? And so this stuff is important. Fear, freak out, panic over dizziness, not your friends. Calm, reassurance, trust. You've been walking all your life. If you got a dizzy spell, it's temporary. Know that. Don't fuel it with more fear because that'll keep the vestibular system that much more sensitive. And we don't want that. We want to settle it down. So remind yourself it's temporary and that this will pass. And the more calmly you can respond to a dizzy spell, if you will, the sooner it's going to pass. And so the example I gave earlier, where if you have to do something, sometimes you end up feeling better. It's because you're shifting your focus from monitoring the symptoms and am I a little bit off balance and fearful, freak out, to I don't have time for this, I got to go do that. So it's fascinating. I think all this stuff is fascinating. So comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'm not minimizing the experience. I'm not suggesting it's not scary. It is. But it doesn't have to be horrific. And if you can know what it is, know that it's an amplification issue, get yourself safe so you don't fall over, because we don't want to be falling everywhere. We don't want to be reckless. But we don't want to lay in bed for the next 6 months waiting for it to pass, because that's not going to do anything other than teach the brain that movement is dangerous. So we want to keep moving to the best of our ability. Be safe. Hang on to the wall if you need to, right? But try not to add additional fuel of thinking catastrophically like, oh no, what if this never lifts? What if I am like this forever? Don't fuel it. Don't add to the fear. Look, sometimes it's scary, and you got to kind of roll with it and say, all right, that was wild, but I know it's temporary. I'm going to be okay. And by doing that consistently, what we're doing is teaching the brain not to be so sensitive in this balanced vestibular system, and it will eventually turn down the volume on that, and you will be less triggered by balance issues, and things can settle down. So I hope this makes sense to you. I hope you find it fascinating too. But that's my take on dizziness and why I think it's fascinating. Hope you found some value in it. And bottom line, try not to freak out. Do your best to reassure yourself. Know it's temporary. Know that this can settle down. And as I often say, your dizziness will settle down when you do. Panic is not your friend. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Love you, and we'll see you tomorrow. Take care.